Why was she just sitting there, staring at a basket of fries she'd never touch? The beer splashed across her table without warning. Amber liquid arced through the murky bar lighting, drowning half the basket, pooling on scarred wood that had absorbed 1,000 nights of spilled drinks and broken pride. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't even glance toward the raucous laughter erupting from 3 tables away. She simply set down her water glass and began methodically dabbing at the spill with a napkin, one slow, deliberate motion at a time. As if this was routine, as if she'd expected it. The woman in the corner wasn't there to drink, wasn't there to socialize. She was there to observe. But those 4 men who just made her their entertainment, who were now howling like wolves tasting first blood, had no idea they were being evaluated by the one person who would determine their entire future. They had no idea that the next 72 hours would unravel everything they thought they knew about respect, about leadership, about what it meant to be chosen for something bigger than themselves. But there was something else they didn't know, something she carried in the silence between breaths, a name, a face, a memory that still woke her at night with chest tight and vision full of smoke. The reason she was here in this dive bar, watching strangers make the same mistakes she'd once overlooked in someone else, someone who didn't make it home. The Driftwood Tavern sat just off Highway 76 near Naval Station, San Diego, wedged between a tire shop and a pawnbroker that seemed perpetually closed. Inside, the walls were scarred dark wood. The jukebox had been silent since 2018. The floor had that soft give from years of spilled beer and heavy boots. No dress code. No questions asked, which explained why it filled up every night by 8. Sarah Mitchell looked out of place at first glance. Dark gray hoodie, black cargo pants, no military insignia, no jewelry, no makeup, just water with lemon and untouched fries. She sat with her back to the wall, not to the door, a subtle choice that separated the trained from the tested, the ones who'd seen enough to know that the real threats don't announce themselves through front entrances. They come from blind spots, from complacency, from the moment you stop paying attention. The bartender, Marcus Hayes, placed fresh ice water on her table without ceremony, just a nod. She returned it with equal brevity. Hayes was 62, a retired master chief with 3 Desert Storm tour behind him. He'd never asked her name. Something about her posture, straight but not rigid, hands loose but never idle, told him everything necessary. She hadn't spoken since entering. That silence was about to shatter. The door swung open hard and 4 men entered like they owned the place. Tan camouflage uniforms with sleeves half rolled, boots dusty from field rotation, laughter louder than needed, not regulars, temporary assignments that bred just enough cockiness without teaching humility. They claimed the high-top table near the center. The tallest one, broad-shouldered with a propaganda poster jawline, waved Marcus down with 2 fingers and a smirk. Rounds for the table, top shelf, let's celebrate. Celebrate what? The smaller one asked, leg bouncing nervously. The only decent bar within 10 clicks that doesn't play country music, the third answered, dragging his stool back with an ear-splitting scrape. The fourth had already noticed the woman. 10 o'clock, solo table, civilian, maybe contractor. The tall one shrugged. Ghost program recruit probably, or someone's ex. Laughter rippled through their group. Not cruel yet, just lazy confidence. The curiosity of young wolves testing boundaries. What they didn't know, couldn't know, was that the only reason she remained seated was because she hadn't decided their fate yet. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell had occupied this bar for 40 minutes. 40 minutes watching muted news cycles across the television. 40 minutes of untouched fries. 40 minutes mentally reviewing files she'd memorized that afternoon. Sergeant Jake Reynolds, 28, Marine Recon, 2 deployments, solid field leadership marks, marginal team cohesion scores, flagged twice for insubordination, both dismissed after peer testimony, an operator who delivered results but left friction behind. Corporal Marcus Chen, 26, communications specialist, high technical scores, nervous under live fire, Psych evaluation noted anxiety management issues, recommended for additional stress training, never received. Private Tyler Wade, 25, field medic, competent, quiet, no disciplinary record, no commendations either, the type who disappeared into formation's middle. Lance Corporal Nathan Foster, 30, oldest of the group, former Force Recon, downgraded after shoulder injury. Father was career military. Iraq 2003, high situational awareness, low tolerance for incompetence. She knew their files inside out, but she didn't know how they moved when nobody graded them, didn't know what they said when command wasn't listening, didn't know if they possessed judgment that couldn't be taught. That's why she was here, off duty, out of uniform, invisible. Admiral Robert Chen had given her 72 hours to evaluate them for Joint Special Operations Task Force 9. 72 hours to decide if these Marines could function alongside Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, and every other elite unit that wouldn't tolerate weakness, ego, or recklessness that got people killed. 72 hours to ensure she didn't repeat the mistake that still woke her at night. Daniel Martinez. She pushed the memory down. Not here, not now. By their third round, the group's volume had doubled. One performed impressions of a commanding officer barking nonsense orders. Another spun an embellished story about a helicopter insertion in the Hindu Kush, pausing for maximum effect. But the noise didn't matter. What mattered was the moment. Jake Reynolds turned from the table to gesture with his beer, trying to punctuate a punchline. His elbow swung high. His boot caught a loose chair leg, off balance for half a second, just long enough for his pint glass to tip. Amber liquid arced clean through the air. It splashed across her table. Half her fries drowned. The water glass tipped but didn't fall. Beer ran across the tabletop, dripping into her lap. The bar paused, just enough to register whether this would escalate. Then came the laughter. Reynolds turned, saw the mess, held both palms up. "Whoa, my bad, that one's on the chair, not me." The others howled. "Thing moved on its own." "Maybe it's her fault," another added. "What's she doing sitting that close to a combat zone?" Sarah Mitchell calmly set her napkin down, picked up her water glass, repositioned it, then began dabbing her lap without urgency, without expression, without even glancing their direction. That rattled them more than any reaction would have. "You all right over there?" Reynolds called, clearly expecting a glare, sharp words, maybe a middle finger. "Need a towel, or maybe just a sense of humor." Marcus appeared silently and handed her fresh napkins and clean water. "Appreciate it," she said quietly, low, clear, measured. That was the first time any of them heard her voice. "You're not going to throw that back at us?" Chen asked, half laughing. She looked at him, one clean glance, no heat, no challenge, then back to the napkin, no words. And that's when everything shifted. The absence of drama, the lack of fury or embarrassment, started to itch under their skin. The way she reorganized the table, precise, deliberate, like this had happened before, like she was giving them rope. "Maybe she's just uptight," one muttered. "Probably writing a Yelp review. 0 stars, Marines too rowdy." Chuckles followed, but the woman didn't move, didn't speak again. She shifted her chair slightly, not away from them, but to an angle that opened her field of view. Then she exhaled once, barely audible, and returned to watching the radar on television as if their storm hadn't even made landfall. Sarah Mitchell had learned long ago that silence was a weapon, not the kind that killed, the kind that made people destroy themselves. Give someone enough quiet and they'll fill it with exactly the truth you need to hear. She was counting. Reynolds had hesitated 2 full seconds before calling out. That hesitation meant doubt, meant he knew on some level he'd crossed a line but wouldn't admit it before his team. Chen, the twitchy one, had deflected with humor, masking discomfort. Classic anxiety management. Wade hadn't said a word, passive, watching others lead. And Foster had watched her face, not the spill, looking for a reaction that never came. They were showing her everything, they just didn't know it yet. What happens when you give someone a second chance before they even know they need one? The minutes crawled by like wounded animals. The four Marines kept drinking, kept laughing, but something had changed in the room's temperature. The woman never looked at them again, never acknowledged the spill beyond cleaning it, never asked for an apology, just existed in her corner with the patience of someone who'd outlasted worse storms than this. Sarah Mitchell's mind drifted to a place she usually kept locked. A briefing room 14 years ago, a deployment to Kandahar province, a junior SEAL named Daniel Martinez who'd been handpicked for her team. Young, brilliant, fearless in all the wrong ways. She'd seen the red flags in his psych eval, impulsive decision-making under stress, difficulty accepting correction, but his technical scores were off the charts. She'd vouched for him anyway, told herself she could manage his weaknesses, told herself potential mattered more than caution. 3 months into deployment, Martinez had disobeyed a direct order during a compound raid, thought he saw a better angle, went off comms, walked into a kill zone that had been flagged in pre-mission briefing. The IED took him and 2 others. Sarah had survived because she'd stayed where she was supposed to be, following protocol, following the training that Martinez had decided didn't apply to him. She'd carried his name like a stone ever since. Not as punishment, as reminder. That leadership wasn't about finding the best operators. It was about finding the right operators. The ones who could be brilliant and humble, lethal and controlled, confident and coachable. The ones who knew when to listen. Admiral Chen had understood when she'd proposed the off-duty evaluation program. You want to watch them when they don't know they're being watched, he'd said. See who they are when the uniform comes off. Yes, sir. And if they fail, then they don't get people killed on my watch, not again. He'd approved it. 72 hours. No contact with their command, no interference, just observation and documentation. If she cleared them, they'd receive orders to report to JSOC within the week. If she didn't, they'd finish their rotation and never know what door had almost opened. Marcus Hayes refilled her water without asking. The old Master Chief had perfected the art of reading silence. He'd watched her ignore the Marines for the past 20 minutes, watched her reorganize the table 3 times, adjusting angles, creating clear sightlines. Military habits died hard. You good? He asked quietly. Always. Those boys give you any more trouble, just say the word. She almost smiled, almost. They're not trouble, just loud. Hayes grunted and moved away. He knew better than to push. Knew that some people carried battles that never made it into after-action reports. At the Marines' table, the conversation had shifted. They weren't talking about the spill anymore. They were talking about the woman. I'm telling you something's off, Foster said, nursing his 4th beer. The way she moved, the way she positioned that chair, that's not civilian. You're paranoid, Reynolds shot back. She's probably just some analyst taking a break from paperwork. Analysts don't sit with their backs to walls, Foster countered. They don't scan exits every 90 seconds. They don't. Drink water in a bar, Chen interrupted. Yeah, that's weird, I'll give you that. Wade, who'd been silent most of the night, finally spoke. Maybe we should apologize. For what? Reynolds asked. It was an accident. An accident we laughed about, Wade said quietly. An accident we made jokes about. Maybe that's the problem. Jesus, Wade, when did you become the morality police? I'm just saying. If that was your sister sitting there, would you want 4 drunk Marines laughing at her? That landed differently. Reynolds shifted in his seat. Chen's leg stopped bouncing for a moment. Foster stared into his beer like it held answers. Fine, Reynolds said finally. I'll go apologize, clear the air, happy. Don't do it because we told you to, Wade said. Do it because it's the right thing to do. Reynolds stood, straightened his uniform, walked toward the corner table with the kind of swagger that masked uncertainty. Sarah Mitchell watched him approach in her peripheral vision, counted his steps, noted the slight hitch in his gait around step 7, the moment he second-guessed himself. "Hey," Reynolds said, stopping a respectful distance from her table. "Look, about earlier, the beer, that was on me. I should have been more careful." She looked up, met his eyes, let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable. "Accidents happen," she said finally. "Yeah, but the way we handled it wasn't cool. I'm sorry." She nodded once, apology accepted. Reynolds waited for more. When nothing came, he shifted his weight. "You military." "Why do you ask?" "The way you're sitting, the way you, I don't know, carry yourself." "Contractor," she lied smoothly. "Security consulting." "Ah, that makes sense." He gestured to the empty chair. "Mind if I sit for a second?" She did mind, but this was part of the evaluation. See how he interacted one-on-one. See if the bravado held when separated from his pack. "Go ahead." He sat, careful not to invade her space. "Points for that." "Reynolds," he said, extending his hand. "Jake Reynolds." She shook it, firm grip, not competing. "Sarah." "You hear often?" "Occasionally." "We're just rotating through. Training exercise up at Pendleton, heading back to Lejeune next week." "How's that going?" "The training," he shrugged. "Same old. Lot of brass, lot of formations, lot of waiting around to be told what we already know." There it was, the edge. The subtle disrespect that looked like confidence from certain angles but was really just impatience with process. Martinez had carried that same edge, that same belief that the rules were for everyone else. "You don't like waiting," she observed. "Not when I could be doing something useful, but that's the core for you. Hurry up and wait." "What would you be doing if you could choose?" Reynolds leaned back. "Honestly, real missions, real impact, not exercises, not training scenarios where we all know how it ends. Something that matters." "Training matters," she said quietly. "It's where you build the muscle memory that keeps you alive when the real thing happens." "Yeah, I know. But knowing it and feeling it are different things, you know." She knew, God, she knew. Martinez had said almost those exact words, 2 weeks before Kandahar. "Your friends seem worried about you," she said, nodding toward the Marine's table where 3 sets of eyes were watching. Reynolds glanced back. "They're good guys, little rough around the edges but solid." "Rough how?" "Chen's anxious. Wade's too quiet. Foster's got a chip on his shoulder about the injury that knocked him down from Force Recon. But when it matters, they show up." "And you?" The question caught him off guard. "Me. What's your edge?" He thought about it, really thought about it. She watched him process, saw the moment he decided to be honest instead of impressive. "I push too hard sometimes, want results faster than they come, get frustrated with process. My last co said I had leadership potential hampered by impatience." Direct quote. "You agree with that assessment?" "I'm working on it." She nodded, stood, extended her hand. "Good luck with your training, Reynolds." He shook it, surprised by the dismissal but respectful of it. "You too, with whatever it is you consult on." He walked back to his table. She watched him relay the conversation, watched the others lean in, watched Foster shake his head like he'd suspected something all along. Sarah Mitchell left $40 on the bar, more than enough for water and fries, and walked out into the California night. She had what she needed for day 1. 48 hours left. 2 more tests, then she'd make her decision. Behind her, in the Driftwood Tavern, 4 Marines had no idea their entire future hinged on the next 2 days. No idea that every interaction was being weighed, every choice measured. No idea that the quiet woman in the gray hoodie held their dreams in her hands. Can you really know someone in 72 hours, or do you just see what they want you to see? Day 2 started before sunrise. Sarah Mitchell stood in the parking lot of a CrossFit gym 3 miles from base, watching through the windows as early morning warriors punished themselves with kettlebells and burpees. She wasn't there for the workout. She was there because Sergeant Jake Reynolds had posted on social media about hitting this gym at 600 every day he was in San Diego. He arrived at 5:58, punctual, alone. She watched him warm up, watched him approach the workout with methodical intensity. No showboating, no cutting corners. When a younger guy struggled with a heavy lift nearby, Reynolds spotted him without being asked, helped him adjust his form, offered quiet encouragement. Different person than the one who'd laughed at spilled beer. Sarah made a note in her phone and left before he noticed her. This was about seeing him when he thought nobody was watching, when there was no performance, no audience, just character showing itself in small moments that seemed to matter to no one but actually mattered to everyone. She spent the next 4 hours trailing the group from a distance. Chen at a coffee shop, hunched over his laptop, practicing communication protocols on simulation software, taking it seriously even though no one was grading him. Wade at the base medical library, reading case studies about field triage in desert environments. Foster running sprints on the beach, pushing through obvious shoulder pain that would have given most people an excuse to quit. They were training when they didn't have to, improving when no one was watching. That meant something. But she'd thought Martinez was dedicated too, thought his intensity was an asset, right up until it killed him. At 1400, she received a text from an unknown number. Coffee shop on 3rd, come alone, Hayes. Marcus Hayes sat in a booth at the back of a cafe that looked like it had been decorated by someone's grandmother in 1987. He had a black coffee in front of him, untouched, and a file folder that he pushed across the table when she sat down. "Thought you might want to see this," he said. She opened it. Incident reports. All 4 Marines. Nothing official, nothing that had made it into their permanent records, but the kind of paper trail that told a different story than performance reviews. Reynolds, 3 noise complaints from base housing. Neighbors reported loud parties, cars blocking driveways. Never escalated because he always apologized and corrected it. Chen, 2 voluntary counseling sessions after a rough deployment. Completed. Psych cleared him, but the notes mentioned persistent anxiety about team safety, bordering on hypervigilance. Wade, letter of concern from a previous co about failure to advocate for himself or voice disagreement even when warranted. Described as competent but passive to a fault. Foster, formal complaint from a junior Marine about demeaning comments regarding physical therapy and injury recovery. Retracted a week later. Both parties received counseling. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "I know people. People who know people. People who remember that sometimes the best leaders are the ones who actually check beyond the glossy resume." "Why show me?" Hayes finally took a sip of his coffee, made a face like it offended him personally. "Because I've been watching you watch them, and I know what you're doing. Same thing I used to do, trying to see if they're worth saving or if they're just polished disasters waiting to kill someone." "That's not." "That's exactly what it is." He leaned forward. "I knew Martinez." The name hit like a fist. Sarah's expression didn't change, but Hayes saw it anyway. He'd been reading people for 40 years. "Daniel was one of mine before he joined SEAL teams. Brilliant kid, fast learner, had that fire that made you think he could do anything, but he never learned to control it. Never learned that sometimes the brave thing is to follow orders you don't agree with. You can't blame." "I'm not blaming you. I'm telling you that you've been carrying his death like penance, and these 4 kids are about to pay the price for your guilt." Silence filled the space between them. The cafe's background noise, espresso machines, quiet conversations, acoustic music, seemed miles away. "They're flawed," Sarah said finally. "Everyone's flawed. Question is whether their flaws are fixable or fatal." "How do you tell the difference?" Hayes closed the folder. You watch them when they think no one's looking. You see if they're trying to get better or just trying to look better. You check if they can hear hard truths without falling apart. And then you make the call. But you make it based on who they are, not who Martinez was. He stood, left money on the table, paused before walking away. For what it's worth, I've been watching them too. They're rough, but rough can be sanded down. Broken can't be fixed. These boys aren't broken, not yet. He left her sitting there with the folder and her thoughts. She read through the reports again, slower this time, looking past the incidents to the patterns. Reynolds fixed his mistakes when called on them. Chen sought help when he needed it. Wade completed tasks even if he didn't speak up. Foster struggled but didn't quit. Flawed but trying. Her phone buzzed, another unknown number. They're at the boardwalk, you should see this. M.H. Sarah found them 40 minutes later. The Santa Cruz boardwalk was packed with families, tourists, the chaos of summer in Southern California. The four Marines sat on a bench eating ice cream like overgrown teenagers, watching the crowds flow past. Then she saw what Hayes meant. A kid, maybe 8 years old, was crying near the arcade, lost, scared, looking around for parents who weren't there. People walked past, noticed but didn't stop. The modern epidemic of not wanting to get involved. Tyler Wade noticed, set his ice cream down, walked over slowly, crouched to the kid's level, said something that made the small boy stop crying. Wade looked around, spotted a security guard, waved him over, stayed with the kid until the guard called for the parents, didn't leave until the mother showed up and the boy was safe. Then Wade walked back to the bench and picked up his melted ice cream like nothing had happened. Good man, Foster said quietly. Someone had to, Wade replied. Most people don't, Chen added. Reynolds nodded, that's the difference. Four men who an hour ago she'd seen as collection of flaws and red flags. Now she saw them respond to a moment that didn't involve them, didn't benefit them, didn't require them to do anything except care enough to act. Martinez would have walked past that kid, would have said it wasn't his problem, wasn't his mission, wasn't his responsibility. She knew it, hated that she knew it, hated more that she'd excused it as mission focus, when really it was just a failure of basic humanity. Sarah Mitchell walked away from the boardwalk with 24 hours left in her evaluation. She still hadn't decided, still hadn't made peace with what choosing them would mean, still hadn't forgiven herself enough to trust her own judgment. But she was starting to wonder if Hayes was right, if she'd been looking for Martinez in every candidate since Kandahar, looking for his ghost so she could reject it this time, save it this time, somehow undo what couldn't be undone. Maybe it was time to stop looking backward. Maybe it was time to see who was actually standing in front of her. How do you know when someone deserves a second chance? Or if you're just hoping they'll be different than the last person you believed in? The final test wasn't something Sarah Mitchell had planned. It was something the universe provided, the way truth usually arrives, unannounced and inconvenient. Day 3, 1900 hours. She was back at the driftwood, sitting in the same corner, same untouched fries, same water with lemon. The four Marines arrived at 19:15. They didn't notice her at first. The bar was more crowded than usual, Friday night energy, people celebrating the end of another week. Marcus Hayes caught her eye from behind the bar, gave her a subtle nod. He'd watched this play out with other candidates, knew how it ended, trusted her process even when she didn't. The Marines claimed a different table tonight, closer to the pool tables. Reynolds had brought a book, of all things, some leadership memoir she couldn't quite make out the title of. Chen was on his phone, texting someone with the kind of focus that suggested it mattered. Wade and Foster were debating something about sports with the easy rhythm of men who'd learned each other's patterns. She was about to leave. Evaluation essentially complete. Report due to Admiral Chen in the morning. Decision made or nearly made, pending one final night's sleep to ensure she wasn't missing anything. Then the door opened, and Corporal David fucking Brennan walked in. Sarah went still, predator still, the kind of frozen that preceded violence or flight. She knew Brennan. Everyone in the SEAL community knew Brennan. Dishonorably discharged 3 years ago for assault. Multiple credible allegations of abuse that never quite resulted in court-martial because witnesses kept recanting. A stain on the uniform that somehow kept showing up at military bars, looking for glory by association and fights by preference. He was drunk, already swaying, eyes scanning the bar for targets. Marcus saw him too, the old Master Chief's jaw tightened. "Brennan, we talked about this. You're not welcome here." "It's a free country, old man, public establishment. I got money, I get served." "Not in my bar." "Your bar," Brennan laughed, cruel sharp. "You're an employee, you don't own shit." 2 of Brennan's friends followed him in, cut from the same cloth, discharged for disciplinary issues. The kind of men who wore their veteran status like armor while dishonoring everything it meant. Marcus reached for the phone, probably to call the cops, probably the right move. Sarah stayed in her corner, watching. This wasn't her fight, wasn't her problem. She was here to evaluate Marines for JSOC, not play hero in a bar confrontation that could end her career if it went wrong. But she also knew what Brennan did to people he perceived as weak, knew the stories, knew he'd put 2 men in the hospital over the past 2 years and somehow walked away both times. Reynolds had noticed the commotion, saw Marcus behind the bar, tense, protective, saw the 3 men who just turned the bar's atmosphere from casual to dangerous. "Stay out of it," Foster muttered, "not our problem." "That bartender's been good to us," Reynolds said. "Still not our problem. We're rotating out in 48 hours. Don't need an incident on our record." Reynolds nodded. Foster was right. Tactically, strategically, career-wise, the smart move was to finish their drinks and leave. Let the cops handle it. Let Marcus handle it. Stay in their lane. But Sarah watched Reynolds' face, saw the calculation, saw him weigh the safe choice against the right choice. Brennan was at the bar now, leaning into Marcus' space. "You gonna serve me, or we gonna have a problem? I'm asking you to leave. And I'm telling you to shut up and pour." The bar had gone quiet, everyone watching, nobody intervening. The familiar dance of civilians hopping someone else would step up so they wouldn't have to risk anything themselves. Reynolds stood. "Jake, don't," Chen said. "I'm just gonna try to defuse it, talk him down. Nobody needs to fight. And if talking doesn't work." Reynolds didn't answer, just walked toward the bar with his hands visible, posture non-threatening. Wade and Foster exchanged looks. Then Wade stood too. Then Foster. Then Chen, muttering something about terrible ideas. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't part of the evaluation. This was real, uncontrolled, dangerous. "Excuse me," Reynolds said, voice friendly, casual. "Hey man, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Brennan turned, looked at Reynolds' uniform, the Marine Corps insignia, the rank. His expression shifted from angry to predatory. "Oh look, jarheads, you boys here to play hero?" "No sir, just trying to help everyone have a good night." "Sir," Brennan laughed, "I'm not your sir boot. I was force recon when you were still in diapers." "I respect that," Reynolds said evenly. "And I respect that the bartender has asked you to leave. Maybe we all just take a breath, walk away, come back another time when things are cooler. Maybe you mind your own fucking business." Foster stepped up next to Reynolds. Wade flanked the other side. Chen hung back but positioned himself where he could see the friends Brennan had brought. "We're making it our business," Foster said quietly, respectfully. Brennan sized them up. 4 active-duty Marines in good shape, sober, positioned tactically, against 3 drunk former operators whose best days were behind them. The math wasn't good. But drunk men don't do math. "You want to throw down?" Brennan asked. "Because I've been fighting longer than you've been alive. I'll put all four of you in the hospital." "Nobody wants to fight," Reynolds said. "We're just asking you to respect the bartender's request and leave. That's it. That's the whole thing." Sarah's hand had moved to her phone, ready to call 911, ready to identify herself if this went bad. But something held her back. The need to see how this resolved. To see if these Marines could handle real pressure, real consequences, real stakes without her safety net. Marcus spoke up. "Brennan, it's done. I've already called the cops. They'll be here in 5 minutes. You can leave on your own terms or you can leave in handcuffs. Your choice." Brennan's friends were already backing toward the door. They knew how this ended. They'd been through it before. But Brennan had too much pride and too much alcohol to back down gracefully. "You'll regret this, old man." "Probably," Marcus agreed, "but not as much as you'll regret staying." The standoff held for another 10 seconds. Then Brennan spat on the floor and walked out, shouldering past Reynolds hard enough to make a point. The bar stayed quiet for another beat. Then conversation slowly resumed. The crisis was over. Reynolds turned to Marcus. "You good?" "Better now, thanks." "What you said about calling the cops?" "Already done. They'll take his name, document it. Means next time he shows up there's a pattern." Reynolds nodded, walked back to his table. His hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline dump. Wade clapped him on the shoulder. Foster muttered something about being glad it didn't escalate. Chen looked like he might throw up from stress. They'd done it right. Positioned themselves to intervene if needed but didn't escalate unnecessarily. Used words instead of fists. Protected someone weaker without showboating. Stayed when it would have been easier to leave. Sarah Mitchell sat in her corner and made her decision. Not because they were perfect. They weren't. Not because they didn't have flaws. They absolutely did. But because when it mattered, when someone needed them, when walking away would have been safer and easier and smarter for their careers, they stayed. They stayed. Martinez wouldn't have stayed. Martinez would have seen it as someone else's problem, someone else's fight, someone else's risk. Would have calculated that interfering could jeopardize his career and chosen himself. These men chose someone else. That was the difference she'd been searching for. The line between soldiers who followed orders and leaders who knew when orders didn't cover what honor required. She finished her water, left cash on the table, walked to the bar where Marcus was wiping down glasses with shaking hands. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I've had worse nights. Those boys did good." "Yeah, they did." "You're gonna clear them, aren't you?" She looked at the four Marines, still processing what had almost happened, still united by the shared experience of doing something right even though it scared them. "Yeah, I am." Marcus smiled, first genuine smile she'd seen from him in 3 days. "Good, they deserve it, and Mitchell." "Yeah." "Stop punishing yourself for Martinez. He made his choice. These boys are making different choices. Let them." She nodded, couldn't speak past the tightness in her throat. Outside, the California night was cool and clear. Sarah sat in her car for 20 minutes, writing her evaluation report on her phone, recommending all four for Joint Special Operations Task Force 9. Tomorrow they'd receive orders. Tomorrow their lives would change. Tomorrow they'd step into something bigger than they'd imagined. But tonight, they were just four Marines who'd stood up for an old bartender because it was the right thing to do. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. What separates the leaders worth following from the ones who just wear the rank? The briefing room at Naval Base San Diego was designed for intimidation. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, photographs of decorated commanders dating back to World War II, a conference table that could seat 20 but currently held 6. Sarah Mitchell sat at the end, hands folded, expression neutral. Admiral Robert Chen sat at the opposite end, reading her evaluation report for the third time. Between them, two Marine Corps officers who'd been brought in as courtesy observers, a Navy psychologist whose job was to flag any concerns, and Master Chief William Harper, who'd somehow inserted himself into the process, because that's what Master Chiefs did. "Your assessment is comprehensive," Admiral Chen said finally, "brutally honest about their flaws, but you're recommending all four." "Yes, sir." Even though Reynolds has documented insubordination issues, even though Chen's anxiety could be a liability under extreme stress, even though Wade is too passive and Foster carries resentment about his injury. "Yes, sir." "Explain." Sarah had prepared for this, had practiced the words in her hotel room at 300 when sleep wouldn't come, and Martinez's face kept appearing in the dark. Reynolds questions orders when he thinks there's a better way. That's not insubordination. That's tactical thinking. He just needs to learn when to voice it and when to trust his command. Chen's anxiety manifests as hypervigilance about team safety. In a spec ops environment, that's not a weakness. That's a communications specialist who actually cares if his operators make it home. Wade is passive with authority, but he's the first one to help a lost kid or back up his team in a bar fight. He doesn't advocate for himself, but he advocates for others. That can be trained. Foster resents his injury because it took him out of force recon, but he's still training, still pushing, still capable. He just needs a mission worth his skill set. "And if you're wrong," Chen asked, "if one of them gets someone killed because their flaw wasn't fixable, then that's on me, sir, same as Martinez was on me." The room went still. The Marine Corps officers shifted uncomfortably. The psychologist made a note. Harper just watched her with those ancient eyes that had seen this movie before. Chen set the report down. "Mitchell, you're one of the best SEAL commanders I've ever worked with. Your record is exemplary. Your teams have the highest success rate and lowest casualty numbers in recent history. But you've turned down 17 candidates for JSOC integration in the past 2 years. 17. That's not high standards, that's fear." "Sir." "Let me finish. You're looking for perfect operators who don't exist because you're trying to prevent a loss that already happened. Martinez died because he made a choice, not because you failed him, not because your evaluation was inadequate, because he in that moment chose ego over protocol. These 4 Marines made different choices. You documented it, you observed it, you verified it, but you're still hesitating because you're afraid of being wrong again." "I'm not hesitating, sir. I'm recommending them." "Are you? Or are you recommending them because an old Master Chief gave you permission to stop punishing yourself?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "Hayes has nothing to do with." "Hayes has everything to do with it," Chen interrupted. "He knew Martinez. He knows you. And he knew that watching these 4 do the right thing when it mattered might be the only thing that convinced you to trust your judgment again." Harper leaned forward. "Admiral, if I may." Chen nodded. "Commander Mitchell's caution isn't fear. It's wisdom earned through loss. She's not looking for perfect candidates. She's looking for evidence of character that matters more than skill. These boys aren't the most talented operators we've seen, but they're the most decent. And in Spec Ops, when everything goes sideways and the mission's compromised and you're deciding whether to leave someone behind or risk everyone to bring them home, decency matters more than talent." "You think they can handle it?" Chen asked. "I think they'll try, and I think they'll learn, and I think Commander Mitchell is the right person to teach them." The psychologist spoke up. "I have concerns about Chen's anxiety profile. The evaluation notes episodes of hypervigilance that could impair decision-making under sustained stress." "Hypervigilance kept my team alive in Kandahar," Sarah said. "The one man who wasn't hypervigilant walked into an IED. I'll take anxious and alive over confident and dead." "Even if that anxiety affects the team's performance." Chen's anxiety affects Chen. His performance affects the mission. The evaluation documented multiple scenarios where his anxiety was present but his performance was flawless. He doesn't let his feelings dictate his actions. That's exactly what we need. One of the Marine Corps officers cleared his throat. Commander, with respect, these men are Marines, not SEALs. The integration program has high attrition. What makes you think they can adapt to Navy Spec Ops culture? They already have, sir. They backed up a Navy Master Chief in a bar fight without being asked. They trained on their off days without being told. They self-corrected when they made mistakes. They put team safety above personal glory. That's not Marine culture or Navy culture. That's warrior culture. The kind that doesn't die when you change uniforms. Chen tapped the report. You're certain? Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. I'm never certain, sir. Martinez taught me that, but I'm confident enough to stake my career on it. These four deserve the chance, and I'll take full responsibility if they fail. You'll take full responsibility if they succeed too, Chen said. They'll be your integration team, your command, your responsibility for the next 18 months. You'll train them, evaluate them, deploy with them. If they wash out, it reflects on your judgment. If they excel, it validates your methodology. Either way, you're committed. Sarah felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders, heavier than gear, heavier than guilt. The weight of 4 lives, 4 careers, 4 futures that hinged on her decision. Understood, sir. Then let's make it official. Chen signed the bottom of the evaluation report. Effective immediately, Sergeant Jake Reynolds, Corporal Marcus Chen, Private Tyler Wade, and Lance Corporal Nathan Foster are hereby assigned to Joint Special Operations Task Force 9 under the command of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell. Training begins Monday at 600. Integration period is 18 months. Attrition is expected. Excellence is required. He looked at Sarah. Don't make me regret this. No, sir. The briefing ended. The Marine Corps officers left, discussing logistics. The psychologist gathered her notes, still skeptical but overruled. Chen departed for another meeting. Harper stayed. You did the right thing, he said. Did I, or did I just commit to 18 months of hopping? I'm not wrong. Leadership is 18 months of hopping. You're not wrong. You just described the job. Sarah almost smiled, almost. Martinez would be 36 now, Harper said quietly. Probably a senior chief, probably training his own team. You ever think about that? Every day. You know what I think? I think he'd be proud of you for learning from his mistake, for not letting it break you, for giving these boys what you couldn't give him. What's that? A commander who understands that perfection is impossible but progress is mandatory. These Marines aren't perfect, but they're progressing, and that's what separates the ones worth saving from the ones already lost. He stood, placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. Train them well, kick their asses when they need it, believe in them when they doubt themselves. And Mitchell. Yes, Master Chief. Forgive yourself, that's an order. He left her alone in the briefing room, surrounded by photographs of commanders who'd made tough calls, some right, some wrong, all necessary. She pulled out her phone, composed a message to 4 numbers. Report to training facility Monday 600. Bring your A game and leave your egos at home. 18 months to prove you belong. Don't waste my time. Commander Mitchell. She hit send. Somewhere in San Diego, 4 Marines received a text that changed everything. They'd get the official orders tomorrow. The paperwork, the logistics, the reality of what they'd just been chosen for. But tonight, they'd celebrate. They'd call family. They'd feel that pure, uncomplicated joy of being selected for something they'd dreamed about but never thought they'd actually achieve. Sarah Mitchell sat in the empty briefing room and let herself feel something she hadn't allowed in 14 years. Hoping. Not that they'd be perfect, not that nothing would go wrong, not that loss was impossible. Just hope that maybe, this time, she'd chosen right, that maybe this time the story would end differently. That maybe Martinez's death had taught her enough to ensure these four lived. That was all any leader could hope for. That was all any human deserved. The chance to learn from failure and build something better. Can you ever really outrun your past, or do you just learn to carry it differently? 18 months later. The memorial wall at Naval Base San Diego held more names than it should, more faces than was fair. Photographs of men and women who'd worn the uniform and paid the ultimate price. Sarah Mitchell stood in front of one particular photo, the way she'd done every year on this date for the past 14 years. Petty Officer Daniel Martinez smiled from the frame, young and invincible in his dress uniform. The photo was taken 3 weeks before Kandahar, before the IED, before Sarah learned that believing in someone's potential wasn't the same as preparing them for reality. Still visiting. She didn't turn, knew the voice. Every year, Master Chief. Harper stood beside her, older now, more weathered, but still carrying that quiet authority that made junior officers straighten their spines. How'd the integration go? You know how it went. You've been getting reports. I want to hear it from you. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Reynolds commands his own squad now, staff sergeant as of last month. Chen made communications officer for the task force. Handles stress better than most officers I've worked with. Wade runs combat medicine courses, turns out when he's teaching his voice finds itself. And Foster leads sniper instruction. Shoulders healed, chips gone. He's exactly what Force Recon lost. And you? I'm still learning to trust my judgment. But you're learning. Yes, I'm learning. They stood in silence, two warriors paying respects to a ghost that had shaped both their paths. They asked to see you, Harper said, before their first independent deployment, said they wanted to thank the commander who gave them a chance. They don't need to thank me, they earned it. Maybe, but they want you to know they remember where they came from. The bar, the spilled beer, the moment they realized someone was watching even when they thought no one cared. Sarah finally turned to look at him. You set that up, didn't you? The evaluation, the bar, the whole thing. Harper's weathered face creased into something almost resembling a smile. I knew Brennan would show up eventually. He always does. Drunk men are predictable. I just made sure you were there to see how they handled it. You manipulated my evaluation. I created an opportunity for truth. What they did with it was all them. Sarah shook her head, but there was no anger in it. Just the weary amusement of someone who'd been outplayed by a better tactician. They're waiting in the briefing room, Harper said. Same one where Chen approved them. Full circle and all that poetic shit. She followed him down the corridor, past more photographs, more names, more reminders that every decision in this profession carried weight measured in lives. The briefing room door was open. Inside, 4 men stood at attention in dress uniforms that fit better than they had 18 months ago. Harder now, leaner, carrying themselves with the earned confidence of operators who'd proven they belonged. At ease, Sarah said. They relaxed, barely. Ma'am, Reynolds started, we wanted to. Don't, she interrupted. Don't thank me. Don't make speeches. You're here because you did the work, because you made the right choices when it mattered, because you showed me you were worth the risk. Still, Chen said, we know what you did, the evaluation, the chance. Most commanders wouldn't have. Most commanders didn't watch someone die because they chose talent over character. I did, so I learned. You benefited from a lesson paid for in blood. Don't waste it. Silence settled over the room, heavy, meaningful. Wade spoke next, his voice stronger than it had been in that bar. We heard about Martinez, about what happened. We're sorry. Don't be sorry, be better. Be the operators he could have been if someone had taught him what I'm teaching you. That's how you honor him. Foster stepped forward. First deployment is Africa, counterterrorism support, 6 months, high risk. I know, I read the brief. We'll make you proud, ma'am. I don't need proud, I need you alive, all of you. Every mission, every firefight, every moment you think being brave means being reckless. You remember that coming home matters more than coming home a hero. Yes, ma'am. She looked at each of them, really looked, saw the boys from the bar transformed into men who understood what the uniform meant, what the sacrifice required, what the responsibility demanded. Dismissed. They filed out. Reynolds paused at the door. Commander, that night at the Driftwood, when you didn't react to the spill, when you just sat there, that was the test, wasn't it? Sarah considered lying, considered keeping the methodology hidden, but they'd earned honesty. Part of it, I needed to see who you were when you thought no one was watching, when you thought your actions didn't matter, because those moments define you more than the ones where you know you're being judged. And if we'd failed, then you'd have finished your rotation and never known what door almost opened. But you didn't fail. You stood up for someone weaker. You chose right over easy. You proved you were worth the risk. Reynolds nodded. We won't let you down. You will, she said. Everyone does eventually. The question is whether you learn from it or let it destroy you. Make sure it's the first one. He left. The room emptied. Harper remained, standing by the window overlooking the base. You did good, Mitchell. Ask me in 6 months, after their first deployment, after I see if they survive contact with the enemy. They'll survive, you trained them. Martinez had training too. Martinez had skill. These boys have character. There's a difference. Sarah walked to the window, watched the 4 Marines cross the parade ground below, headed toward whatever future awaited them. 18 months of training, 18 months of transformation, 18 months of proving they deserved the chance she'd given them. I used to think leadership was about making people better, she said quietly. Now I think it's about recognizing who's already trying to be better and just getting out of their way. That's wisdom right there. That's exhaustion talking. Harper laughed, genuine, warm. You know what the best part of your evaluation method is? What? It's spreading. 3 other commanders have requested permission to implement off-duty evaluations. The Driftwood's becoming legendary. Marcus Hayes is considering charging admission. God help us all. Indeed. They stood together, watching the base prepare for another day, another mission, another generation of warriors learning what it meant to serve something bigger than themselves. You going back, Harper asked, to the memorial wall? Later, after they deploy, after I know they're safe. And if they're not? Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then I'll add their names to the list of people I carry, same as Martinez, same as everyone I couldn't save. But I'll keep training the next generation. Keep looking for the ones worth saving. Keep hopping that eventually I get enough of them home to balance the ones I didn't. That's a heavy burden. It's the job. No, Harper corrected. The job is command, the burden is caring. You chose that part yourself. 3 years later, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood at the same memorial wall. The names had multiplied. New faces, new losses, but Martinez's photograph remained unchanged, smiling in his dress uniform. She wasn't alone this time. Reynolds stood beside her now, a staff sergeant training his own integration team. Chen had made communications officer. Foster led sniper instruction. Wade ran combat medicine courses. Ma'am, Reynolds said quietly, the new integration class starts tomorrow, 12 Marines. I ran the pre-assessment last night, off duty. At the Driftwood, Mitchell asked. Back corner table, water with lemon. She smiled, actually smiled. And 3 of them spilled drinks near my table, laughed about it, didn't know who I was. Did you tell them? No, ma'am, I let them talk, listened, assessed, just like you taught me. Mitchell looked at Martinez's photo one more time, touched the frame gently. I got it right this time, Daniel, she whispered. Took me 14 years, but I got it right. She turned to Reynolds. The tradition continues. Train them the way I trained you, not louder, quieter. Let them show you who they are before you show them who you want them to become. Yes, ma'am. They walked down the corridor together. Behind them, the memorial wall stood silent, names in granite, faces frozen in time, reminders that leadership wasn't about perfection. It was about learning from failure, about giving second chances, about understanding that the quietest voice in the room was often the one worth listening to most. And somewhere in San Diego, at a dimly lit bar called the Driftwood, a new group of Marines was making their first mistakes, not knowing that someone was watching, not knowing that someone was giving them the chance to become something better. 6 months later, new Marines entered the Driftwood, young, loud, cocky. One of them gestured too widely, knocked over a drink. It splashed toward a corner table where a woman sat alone. Reynolds and Chen were at the bar, off-duty civilian clothes. They saw it happen. Should we tell them? Reynolds asked quietly. Chen watched the woman calmly dab at the spill, reorganize her table. She wore a gray hoodie. No patches. No unit pride, just water and fries. She was new, not Mitchell. Different evaluator, same methodology. No, Chen said, let them learn. The woman stood, moved to a different table, and as she passed the Marines, she said something too quiet for Reynolds and Chen to hear. But they saw the Marines' faces change, saw the moment they realized they'd made a mistake. Chen smiled. The cycle continues. Yeah, Reynolds said, it does. They finished their drinks and left. Outside, the base lights glowed in the distance. Somewhere out there, Commander Mitchell was preparing the next mission, training the next team, passing forward the lessons learned from a bar incident that had changed everything. And in a memorial corridor on base, under Petty Officer Daniel Martinez's name, a Navy cross was mounted. Below it, a small brass plate. For teaching us that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the last one standing when the loud ones fade. For showing us that second chances aren't given, they're earned. And for proving that sometimes the most dangerous person in any room is the one who lets you keep talking long enough to reveal exactly who you are. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, United States Navy, SEAL Team 11 *, Joint Special Operations Task Force 9 *. On nights when the bar was full and the stories flowed and young operators made the same mistakes 100 others had made before them, someone would always end up at that corner table. Back to the wall, water with lemon, fries untouched, watching, assessing, waiting. Inside the Driftwood, Marcus Hayes finished wiping down the bar. The last patrons had filtered out. The lights were dimming. Master Chief Harper sat at his usual spot, nursing the last of his beer. Think she'll keep doing this? Marcus asked. The off-duty evaluations. She will, Harper said. It's her methodology now. Learn by watching. Teach by letting them fail in small ways before they fail in ways that cost lives. That's a lonely way to lead. Harper stood, left cash on the bar, looked at Marcus with those weathered eyes that had seen decades of war and training and the cyclical nature of military excellence. That's the only way to lead. He walked out into the night. The Driftwood Tavern sat quiet now, wedged between the tire shop and the pawnbroker. The jukebox still broken, the floor still soft from years of spilled beer, the walls still scarred with initials nobody remembered. But inside those walls a tradition lived, a methodology, a quiet revolution in how leaders were made, not through volume, not through intimidation, not through the kind of loud confidence that got people killed, through silence, through observation, through the calculated decision to let people reveal themselves, then the grace to build them back better. Somewhere in San Diego, 4 Marines slept the sleep of men who'd been tested and found worthy, who'd failed spectacularly and been given the rarest gift in the military, A second chance paired with a mentor who believed in potential over perfection. And somewhere else, in a small apartment near base, Sarah Mitchell sat at her kitchen table reviewing files for the next evaluation cycle. 12 new names, 12 new chances to get it right, 12 new opportunities to honor Martinez's memory by ensuring no one else died because a junior officer was too afraid to speak up. She touched the old trident pin Harper had given her, now sitting in a small frame on her desk next to a photograph. Her and Martinez at Bud's graduation, young and invincible and convinced they'd live forever. "I'm still learning, Daniel," she whispered to the photograph, "still making sure your death wasn't for nothing." Outside, the California night was cool and clear. The base lights twinkled in the distance, and in the darkness between the streetlights, the future took shape. One quiet evaluation at a time, one humbled Marine at a time, one lesson at a time. Because the best commanders weren't the ones who never made mistakes. They were the ones who made mistakes, learned from them, and spent the rest of their careers making sure the next generation didn't have to learn the same lessons the hard way. That was the tradition. That was the legacy. That was the silent revolution happening in corner booths and dimly lit bars across every military installation where pride met consequence and humility was born. And it would continue, one spilled drink at a time, for as long as there were leaders wise enough to know that the most powerful weapon in any arsenal wasn't a rifle or a missile or a perfectly executed breach. It was patience, observation, and the quiet certainty that every person deserved the chance to become better than they were, even if they didn't know they were being tested, especially if they didn't know they were being tested. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.